Hi everyone, welcome to the Wool and Spinning Podcast. My name is Rachel and I can be found pretty much everywhere as Well for Pearls. I'm coming to you from just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, and thank you so much for checking out the show. I wanted to wish everyone a happy new year. I hope that Christmas was wonderful for you and that the new year was great, and I hope that this finds you well. We've actually had sort of an interesting new year thus far. 2016 is off to an interesting start. The kids are super sick. They've got hand, foot, and mouth, and Nora also has pneumonia. So she's on antibiotics because it was confirmed on chest x-ray, and we did all the due diligence, and eventually we decided she did need antibiotics. So we've put her on those, and she's actually starting to feel better, so I can see that it was the right thing to do. She's got a real rattle in her chest, and she just doesn't sound and look great. And neither kids are sleeping because they've got the blisters in their mouths from the hand, foot, and mouth. So it's been a bit rocky. We've been quarantined because of the hand, foot, mouth, and it's really hard to keep two kids under 4 in the house or like just around the neighborhood on walks for very long. It's getting a little bit tedious. But hopefully they'll start feeling better. And I'm recording this on Sunday and on January 10th. And I'm hoping that this week they'll start to perk up and get back to normal. The kind of drawback of all of that was I actually had already recorded the podcast, and I have some big announcements to make. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, the audio wasn't working. It's not that it wasn't working, it was just really quiet. So you as the viewer would have to turn it up so loud that there ended up being a hum. And I was listening to it on my headphones, and I was like, it's just not enjoyable. And for the first show of 2016, I didn't want to put that out there. But then the kids got sick, and so I've got wool in my nose. I've got wool everywhere here, and it's just like totally in my nose. The unfortunate thing about that was that I couldn't re-record right away. So this, and I wanted to pare the show down anyways. So in some ways it was kind of a good thing, but because really you can't sit there and watch me for like a cajillion hours. It would be great if we all had that time, but so my plan was to sort of pare the show down a little bit. So here we are. I'm re-recording. I'm also in a new space. So I always used to record downstairs, and I always had the same. I recorded in our dining room. I don't have anywhere in the house that's kind of my space. So we decided to rearrange our master bedroom, and I actually have a corner now that's like my office. So I have my laptop, my camera equipment, my drum carder is going to go right here, and then I can put it in its box and store it underneath when I'm not using it. I have everything, all my bookshelf and everything is organized, and it's kind of nice. I'm kind of getting slowly feeling like I have a bit of an office again. When we had kids, I lost my office. So when I was doing my master's degree, James's room actually was my office. And then when I finished my master's and we had our first child, we took down my office and I lost that space. So our house is not tiny, but it's not a big home. It's perfect for us, and it just means I don't have a ton of space. So that's okay. Our hobby takes up space. That's just the reality. So I have a lot to talk about. I have a few things that I wanted to talk about towards the end of the show, and do some housekeeping towards the end of the show, because I know for some people that's not really what's interesting to you. So I have quite a bit of housekeeping at the end of the show. I have some information about another giveaway to share with you. So if you're interested in some of that stuff, please stick around for the end. And in the meantime, I have some hand spun knitting finished objects, which I'm just so excited to share with you. And I have a lot of finished hand spun yarn. So this is going to be a very heavy finished objects podcast to start off the new year. I was clearing off my wheels. I was clearing off my needles. It's kind of neat. It's kind of awesome actually to start the year that way. So it just means that next episode will be kind of starting things up again and starting new things. So that's kind of neat too. A great way to start the year. So the first thing that's off my needles is, and I think some of you are thinking that I'm gonna show you my shawl first, but I'm actually not. I'm gonna show you my socks first. These were my, when I say I'm drowning in stuff here, I'm not lying. Like, there's stuff everywhere. These were my handspun socks. I finished them on Christmas Day. I think I finished them on Christmas Day. I'm actually getting quite a good pickup of the color here, so I'm going to keep the camera here and keep the socks here. They're more saturated than what they're showing. The camera's blowing it a little bit. There's more turquoise in there and more purple, but they turned out really, really well. These were dyed by, the fiber, was dyed by Marianne of Smith & Hugh. She's located in Kamloops, British Columbia. I used the Fish Lips Kiss heel for these. So again, the camera will blow out, but at least you can get an idea of what the short row heel looks like. I think the pattern to do the Fish Lips Kiss heel is only like $2. And it's like 16 pages long or something ridiculous. But the actual pattern is only on like one page. It's not as intimidating as people think. You draw a template of your foot, and then she gives you some measurements to take and how to do the short row heel. I love it because there's no gaps. And I tend to be a tight knitter anyways. I always have to go up a needle size when I'm swatching for patterns. And it's just nice having a pattern that's as tight as this, because if you look at the heel axis right in there, it's just there's no gaps, like there's no filling that in. The light is not liking me right now. So the sun's coming in from this side, and it's a beautiful day. It's cold, but it's beautiful. Anyway, so these went really super fast. These were my handspun superwash BFL. Like I said, it was Smith & Hugh fiber. She can be found at smithandhugh.com. I actually have quite a bit of yarn left. This handspun was a combination draft. So I stripped the fiber down as much as I possibly could until it was getting flyaway. So I stopped when it started sort of being a bit flyaway. And then I broke it up so that I had piles of color. And then I picked up different strips with different color in it so that when I was drafting, I'd have 3 or more colors drafting together. And unfortunately on the camera, you can't really see, but it created a really heathered yarn. And like I said, I've talked about this stuff before, so I won't go into too much detail. And I've done quite an extensive blog post on this yarn, which I'll link to in the show notes. But the effect of the combination drafting was this beautiful heathering, and I just love it. So I was actually chatting with, oh shoot, I can't remember who it was. It was online. Entangled, I think. Is your Instagram name is Entangled, I think. I'm going to do a compliments combination draft next. So I've got a braid in my stash that I just don't know what to do with. And it's like green and red and orange and blue. And it's just not really my color combination. I love those colors, just not in that combination. So I think what I'm going to do is actually break it up just like I did with this stuff. And I'm going to do a complement so that the red and the green will draft at the same time. And it'll end up quite muddied. But I think it'll create a really lovely heathered yarn. So yeah, this was very, very, very high twist. It was so high twist that even while I was knitting it, I had to like pull it apart, like untwist it. I have worn these socks already. Not a ton, but I've worn them quite a few times. And so that's how twisted the yarn was. And so far, they look like they're brand new. They have a little bit of fuzz to them just because it's BFL, and that's kind of what BFL does. And I love that about BFL. Blue Face Lister, for those who aren't familiar with that acronym BFL. But yeah, they have quite a lovely fuzz that's sort of developed. But like I said, it's they look like brand new. And I have washed these. I've put them in the washing machine, and then I've hung them to dry. So far, they've turned out really well. The sun has moved, and I've ended up with this like weird glare here. So I'm just going to turn the camera a little bit and get my Snoqualmie shawl ready to show you. I'm so excited to show it to you. And then we'll carry on. Yeah, so it's just a matter of turning the camera. Okay, so my next finished object is huge. I I feel like as spinners and knitters and spinners and weavers, or whatever your craft of choice, spinners and crocheters, I feel like this project for me is like, if I finish 1 or 2 of these projects a year, that's like going to be huge, just because of our life and everything that we all juggle and whatnot. The kids, doing the podcast, that takes time. And I feel like this project really was the summation of 2015 for me. I feel like I did a lot of learning. I feel like I connected with so many wonderful people through the podcast and the blog. Two of my goals for 2015 that I never talked about was making my blog a priority in terms of like really getting back into my photography. I did photography through high school and early university. A couple of my electives in first year university was photography. And I really loved it. And so getting back to blogging was sort of getting back to some of those things that I really loved, that I had put aside because I only wanted to knit for quite a number of years. And so the spinning has kind of really forced me to reassess the things I want to do. So this BFL alpaca was totally a homage for me to the things that I really want to be doing. And I think I was talking to Chrissy of the Snappy Stitches podcast about this. We were texting back and forth last week about it. I think I'm really starting to shift in my tastes and what I want to work with. This just makes my heart sing. Working with the raw fiber, figuring out what blend I want, swatching for it, doing a spinner's control card, writing down all of my information, just doing all of that. And I think it just really, for me, solidified that this is the stuff that I really love doing. And this is all that's left for the yarn. This is about 48 yards, I think I have left. And so I'm actually really glad that I didn't use all of my yarn, because I really want to have some of this to be able to put it with the shawl when I show it, and be able to say, like, this was the original yarn and this is the finished object. When I was sampling this and when I was swatching for it, this directly relates to the fiber to finished object spin along, knit along. People have had some great ideas for names and stuff, so thank you so much. If anybody else has any ideas for names, just throw them out there. I love the one somebody suggested, Zero to Hero, and I thought that was a great idea, because it's like, going from zero and starting with the raw fiber to finishing this awesome project, whatever that is for you. So we might use that. But what I did with this was I calculated the fiber. I figured out what an 85-15% alpaca, BFL alpaca blend would be. I made those bats on my drum carder. So each bat was an 85-15% blend. So that's how I made sure that it was even throughout, that the alpaca was spread throughout the BFL evenly. So each bat was 85% BFL, 15% alpaca. And then from there, I took one of the smaller bats that I had made and I spun the whole thing and I sampled it. And that's how I got all of this information down here. I'm just going to wait for my camera to focus. That's how I got all this information here. Plied at 15 twists per inch. It was roughly a 60-degree twist angle, which is kind of, I wanted it to be a lower twist lofty yarn because I was spinning it with a woolen, semi-woolen draft. So it was a short forward draw. I let the twist in by removing my fingers and then returning to the fiber supply. So basically, and I divided the bat 4 times prior to spinning. And then at the end, I put in all this information up here at the end, what my yards per pound ended up being and what my total yardage was. The ratio that I was using, I was spinning it at 10-1. And to get my twist angle, for those who don't know, I used it's sort of a protractor type thing that Sweet Georgia has adjusted. I just put the yarn across it and I match up my twist angle. And I know that this is about 60 degrees because I knew it was over 50 degrees, so it doesn't actually match any of the twist angles on here. So you just put your yarn across and you match whichever one is the one that matches, but you can see how low twist that is. I have a protractor, and so I actually use that most of the time. It's more accurate, and I can really figure out, especially because when I'm doing these low twist yarns, you need more than 50 degrees. I need like 60, 70, 80 to figure out kind of where I'm at. So these are very helpful. The Woolery sells these. Nancy's Knit Necks sells these. Sweet Georgia included these in their Spinzilla pack. But there's, they're out there. They're available for anybody. But honestly, a protractor works just as well. And I will talk in another show about why your twist angle is important and why that's something that you maybe want to think about. But one of the places that I started when it came to twist angle was I just started figuring it out. That was all I did. I didn't do anything with it. I didn't use it. But I did start counting my twists per inch and looking at my twist angle, and then I just left it. And I did that for a really long time because I don't think I've talked about twist angle and twists per inch on the show before. But I've been looking at it for a long time, and just recently in the fall, I started actually using it. It all has to do with spinning a more consistent yarn and sampling and keeping everything consistent. So we'll talk about it later in the show on another episode, but not right now. So just start looking at those things and trying to figure it out more than anything. When you first start looking at that stuff, don't feel like you have to you do something with the information. It's just nice to start collecting it so that as you gain knowledge, you can say, oh, right, my angle of twist, blah, blah, blah. So keep that in mind. Where was I going? I'm really sorry. It's hard when you record a show a couple of times because you sort of forget what you've talked about and what you haven't talked about. So anyways, I did all of that, and then I sampled with the mini bat that I had made that was, and I figured out how I wanted to spin it and what was comfortable, because the way I had originally thought I'd spin it was a long backwards draw, but it was too slippery. I just couldn't get it all to work, and that's why I ended up with the short forward, letting the twist in. So I would pull forward, let my fingers go, pull forward, let my fingers go, pull forward. And what it created was this really lofty yarn. But then I needed this information to stay consistent, because when I was spinning for Spinzilla, it was easier to stay consistent because I was spinning so quickly and it was in such a condensed time period. But it was nice to have this to go back to say, okay, where am I at? And I would pull out, I actually have like a school little 15-inch ruler, the little ones that we put in our kids' pencil bags to take to school. I have one of those that goes, I have a little pack. I have this protractor and a little ruler, and I just kept lining it up as I was spinning when I was plying, especially to make sure that my angle of twist and my twist per inch were right. So that's how I ended up with such a consistent yarn. And all of that I had kind of figured out during the sampling process. So for the fiber to finish object, spin along and eventually knit or crochet along or weave along, whatever you're doing, take some fiber and, try some different drafting methods, try some different whirls, and then look at your finished spun items, your little sample skeins, and decide which one do you like the best. The one that you like the best, do some more, and then you can knit up a little swatch and figure out, is this what I want to do? And if not, go back to the beginning. And if it is what you want to do and you want to carry on, then, go to your fiber and start spinning it, make a little control card, whatever you want that to look like. Mine look like this. And then what I do is later, I go back. It's not going to focus, but that's okay. Later, you saw this already. So I go back and I put on the back what my project was. So when I go to this control card later, I can see that this was for the Snoqualmie Valley shawl. It was part of the Shackleton Cal, part of the Fiber Trek TV podcast, and I spun the yarn during Spinzilla. So that's sort of what I do with these eventually, because I do eventually file them in a little, I should show that to you next time. I have a little filing thing that I put all these in, and all the yarn is kind of sticking out the end. It's quite cute. So that's how you build a spinner's control card, and that's how I do it. Everybody does it a little bit differently. And that's how I sampled for this project, and that's how I sort of knew what I was doing and what the yarn was going to look like. So for those who are starting to sample and starting to look at what you want to do for your fiber to finished object, spin along, knit along, that's sort of how you do that. I hope that answers people's questions. So, do you want to see the finished object? I am so pleased with this. So this is my Snoqualmie Valley shawl. This Snoqualmie Pass in Washington, we've actually gone through it many, many, many times, more times than I can probably even count. And we go camping right around there quite often. So I felt like this was really a really wonderful kind of project, a really lovely sort of, it just felt very relevant, I guess is the right word. So this is how I've been wearing it. Because let's be honest, it's enormous and it's wonderful. And I've been putting my jacket over top because it's been quite cold and we've had a lot of very, very, very frosty mornings. I feel like the lace just, with the alpaca content, I mean, it just drapes beautifully and it's just got this really lovely feel and look to it. I had a lot of fun photographing it because I was sort of figuring out like how to hold it and how to, you know, really show it off. And to really show it, I had to like hold it out. I don't know if you're on Instagram, but some of Annie Roden, the actual designer, shared that photo on her Instagram account, which was really lovely of her to do. And I'm just so happy with it. I kind of don't know what to say because it just sums up everything, you know. It just, I'm so happy with it. I think it's probably one of my, I think I'm probably the most proud of this of just about anything that I've done. I've done some other great projects, but I think if I had to choose one project, this would definitely be the project. So I'll show you the lace one more time. So how this is constructed is you actually cast on at one end and you knit all the way up just the lace panel. There's a lot of shawls out there that are designed this way, and you just knit up, and then after you're finished knitting miles and miles and miles of this lace cable and lace pattern, you pick up along the one edge all the way along, and then you start doing short rows to shape the top. And actually that was my only modification, was I actually did the short rows that are part of the Fish Lips Kiss Heel. Sorry, I have alpaca in my mouth. It feels very odd. And that was the only modification I did. I did not do wrap and turns. And the only reason why I didn't is because I really don't like the look of wrap and turns when they're not finished. I really like wrap and turns and short rows when they look finished. And that's the lovely thing about the Fish Lips Kiss Heel short row, is that it looks finished when it's done. And it maintains the garter stitch when you need it to. So that was my reason for doing that. I can't see, so I'm just hoping that you guys can see. But this is what the edge looks like where you pick up. So hopefully that's in focus. Yes, it is. And then you do a row. You do run one row where you're doing yarn overs and some fancy stuff before you start. And I think that just creates a really lovely edge before you start the garter. There's some details in this shawl that are just beautifully thought through. Annie's brilliant in my opinion. And I was going to dye this. I talked very extensively last show about dyeing this. I was going to do logwood. Right up until I was casting off, I was going to dye it. I wasn't even going to block it. I was going to dye it right away. But in the end, I actually decided, putting the shawl on pulled my hair out. In the end, I actually decided I love it as is. And if I change my mind in a year or two, then I'll dye it then. But for now, it's going to stay cream. And like I said, it's enormous. The pattern calls for, on the projects page, it calls for knitting this on 4.5 millimeter needles. I actually, for the first time probably ever, I sized down. I went to 4 millimeter needles. And the reason for that is actually because I wanted, I wanted to use as much yarn as I possibly could because I knew I had more than enough yardage, and sizing down needles will use more yarn. It creates a slightly denser fabric. I also wanted the garter stitch to be quite, I didn't want it to be loose and airy. I wanted it to be quite, not dense, but I wanted it to have some substance, and that's exactly what the smaller needles created. So I'm quite happy with how that turned out. And I think actually my finished dimensions are a wee bit smaller than the original, which I'm actually happy about because this is big enough as it is. And that's saying something since I absolutely love big shawls. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. Thank you to everybody's lovely comments on Ravelry and on Instagram about it. I have been really touched at some of the things that people have said. It's been really kind. So thank you so much for saying how much you like it, because I'm kind of in love. I kind of want to knit another one, but I also am sort of like, there's other patterns out there. There's actually Annie has designed another one called Tales of the Purbeck Isle, I think it's called. It's beautiful. Jennifer of JK Knits knit it with a friend of hers, and I'm actually thinking really seriously about spinning for that next. I'd like to do the canopy shawl, which I'm doing with Rochelle of Endless Roving. We're kind of working through that together. And for the fiber to finished object spin along, we need a better name. Zero to Hero or something. So I think that once I finish that, I think that Tails will be my next project. I'm not really sweater knitting anymore. It's kind of funny, like sweaters were my thing. I was a sweater knitter. And I'm kind of moving past that. And I think a lot of it is that sweaters are miles and miles of stockinette because I prefer plain sweaters. I find I wear them more. And they're just not interesting enough. And so I think that's why I'm sort of gravitating towards shawls and more like stoles and wraps, where you maybe don't wear them as much, but when you do, you really enjoy them. And I think that's why I'm navigating to socks a lot more, because I actually wear them a ton. Being outside with the kids so much and wearing my boots and stuff, I find I need more substantial socks. So maybe that's why there's sort of been this shift for me. I'm not sure. So that's it for handspun knitting. I feel like that's huge, but that is all. And I just, thank you to everybody who's sort of reached out and has said such lovely things about that shawl, because I have to admit I'm pretty smitten. I have some finished spinning. When I originally recorded the show, this stuff was not done. And I was showing my bobbins again, and I was like, oh, this is so boring, blah, blah, blah. But it's actually finished. And some of you who are on Instagram and will have seen, you'll already have seen the finished skein. Again, this was my spinner's control card. So this was what I started with when I first started spinning. I haven't put the washed yarn on. You'll see that that is still empty. And the reason for that is because I haven't wound it into a skein yet. Sorry, into a ball yet. It's still in a skein form. So until I do that, I don't generally add the yarn. So this is all my information. This is the total yardage that I got after it was dry, after I washed it. That's how much it weighs, and that's my grist. I plied it to 8 twists per inch with the hopes of, this is where it gets kind of dicey, because I wanted the finished yarn to have 8 twists per inch because Polworth is 8 crimps per inch generally. And a great place to start with spinning is to figure out what your crimps per inch of the original fleece was, and then to spin to that so that you end up with theoretically a perfectly balanced yarn. And you guys know how I feel about balanced yarn. I feel like there's a place for balanced yarn, absolutely, but sometimes you need a yarn that's lower twist, and sometimes you need a yarn like for socks that's higher twist. Lower twist makes really beautiful lace work when it's a 2-ply. So but I wanted to try this with this Polworth to spin it to like some specs. This was sort of my first foray into like really paying attention to this control card and figuring out, okay, I've got singles that are roughly 11. They were spun at roughly 11 twists per inch, roughly. If I had whirl ratios, that's the problem with the Hansen. I don't know what whirl I was on. I just know that I was at 2 o'clock with moderate uptake. But when I twisted it back on itself and did a ply back test, when I was doing the singles, I had roughly 12 twists per inch. So when I went to ply it, I wanted it to have a slightly less ply because I knew that it would make a really bouncy yarn and stuff. So that's what I did. So I've ended up with almost 1,000 yards. I've got 880 yards. So I can really do something with this. And it's so fluffy and bouncy. And it's not my most even spinning. And I think the reason for that is because I started this so long ago, and I kept leaving it and coming back to it and leaving it and coming back to it. And then we were away for 2 weeks in December, and it really got left. And I think it just kind of, I needed to make it a priority, but there was the December Fiber Club and there was other stuff going on. So it's not super, super even, but my plan for this is actually the Succulent Shawl by Maria Monska, who is the Stitched in Sweden podcast. She's lovely on the podcast, and I just really appreciate her designs, and I really like what she does. I'll try to stop looking so that it focuses. So this is this was seconds from the studio. It wasn't dyed properly, and the braids were broken. I did have 2 braids. Yeah, and so my finished yarn is 8 twists per inch. It's perfectly balanced, which for me is really unusual. It's very bouncy. Polworth, after it's washed, gets really bouncy, and it has a real, like, it just kind of comes alive. I always feel like when Polworth is in its singles, it's sort of flat and a little bit lifeless kind of, and then you wash it and it just comes to life. It just poofs up, and it just it has a real, I don't know, joie de vivre. It just, I don't know how to explain it, but it does go quite puffy. I could show you an example of what it looks like in the bobbin, but I don't think I have it within reaching distance. It's the Sweet George Yarns Club for January. It was, spoiler alert, it was Polworth and silk. And on the bobbins right now, it looks kind of flat. Beautiful colors because of the silk content, but it just is kind of flat. So this, because this skein is so huge, because I plied it on my woolly winder on my Hanson, so the skein is just ridiculously ginormous. It makes me think of Cascade Eco. You know how big those skeins are? So it's kind of a little bit ridiculous, but that's okay. It's a great way of storing it until I skein it. I think this is going to be my next project. I don't really have anything on the needles right now. Like I said, this is kind of the month of finishing, and then it'll be on to the next thing. So, yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I love how gray it is, and I'm really hoping that when I start the Succulent Shawl that it'll just really be nice in that. I'm hoping it's not too variegated. I guess we'll see. So that was finished. Again, here's an example of a spinner's control card. This one's a little bit different than my other one, but that gives you an idea of what I do for my control card and how to keep things consistent. So that is that. And that, like I said, is finished. So much fun showing you guys finished stuff. The other thing that's finished, and this is just a really quick, hi, how are you doing? And then I'm not going to talk about it a ton, is another skein of Falkland is done. So this was a side project for the Shackleton Cal. Some of us, when Shackleton was sailing down to South America, he would have stopped at that time in the Falkland Islands for provisions. And so some of us were doing a side project with Falkland. And I have 550 grams of this stuff, so I'm just very slowly working through it. When I don't really have another spinning project, I'm putting it on the match list. I'm spinning it in double drive, long backwards draw. This is a 3-ply, which is really, woolen yarns tend to be 2-plies, and the reason for that is woolen yarns are very lofty, they're very airy, and the more plies you add, the more that twists that woolen aspect of the yarn down. It makes it more and more condensed, and it also makes it very bulky, because the more air it's in the yarn, the more space it takes, and then you twist all those things together and you've just got a lot more space than you do with, like, say, a 3-ply worsted spun yarn that's been smoothed down and everything's really lovely and all the ends are tucked in and it's all, you know, smooth. But I did do this as a 3-ply because I'm finding, because of the fineness of the Falkland, it's the long draw, it's just so spinning so fine, and it's very tweedy, as you can see, and I'm just finding it needs the 3-ply to kind of hold it all together. And I think that the tweed aspect of the yarn is sort of what makes it. And I sort of want to, I need something to sort of hold it all together. Come on. Of course, I'm peeking and it doesn't like that. So it kind of needs something to like hold it all together. And I think, there we go. And I think it just needs that third ply. And it's still very, very fine. Like it's still, I think it's probably like I'll show you on this one. It's not as tightly skeined. I think it's probably, I haven't washed this stuff yet, but I think it's going to pop up to like a sport weight. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this because I don't really want to knit a whole sweater out of like almost fingering weight yarn. So I'm going to wait and see, because my original plan was a round necked, longish cardigan just to throw on over a t-shirt like what I'm wearing right now, and just throw it on over top. So I guess I'm going to have to see what my yardage is. This is about 300 yards thus far, but it's not washed and it's wool and spun, so it will shrink a little bit. So I guess we'll have to see. I still have a lot to go. I'm kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed. But I have some news for later in the show, and you guys will not feel so sorry for me when I tell you. How's that for a teaser, hey? That's terrible. Sorry. Hashtag not sorry. So, the last thing that I have to show you today, and then I have some stuff that I never do that I wanted to do today because it was just Christmas, and usually I don't show stash acquisition because there's too much other stuff to talk about. But I have been but I am gonna today because I got some fun stuff. I got really interested over the Christmas holidays in textured spinning, and the reason for that, and I've misplaced it because the kids were being really nightmarish this morning. Like I said, they're getting really squirrely, and I can't see where I put it. The texture issue of ply got my copy got lost in the mail, and I've never received it. Our mailboxes got broken into. It's a whole big story. We lost some stuff, and ply, I think my ply magazine was one of those things. So I contacted them, excuse me, and Jessica, who's the person that you'll talk to if you contact like the customer service side of Ply Magazine, got in touch with me right away, and they sent me a new one right away. And the issue just kind of got me thinking. I was waiting for it. I hadn't received it yet, about textured spinning. And I had totally like, I think a lot of new spinners do this. I certainly know that I did. And I do know other new spinners that have done the same because we've had conversations about it. I think when it comes to textured or art yarn spinning, because you see such crazy skeins out there and they don't feel very knit work, like you can knit with them. I had sort of just pawned it off as something that wasn't for me. I wasn't interested in it. There was no way I could knit with that yarn, and why would you want to? And like just very judgmental, let's be honest. And not really giving it a shot. And because I'm a Craftsy affiliate, and you get a show for one of the Craftsy classes for free, I had contacted my affiliate person and asked her if I could possibly have the spinning art yarn class. And she said, yeah, no problem. So there will be a blog post later in the month about my review. So if you're not interested, that's totally fine. But I watched it while we were away and while we were in Toronto, and it really got me thinking. And JC Boggs Falconer always gets me thinking, and she really challenges me. And I so appreciate that there are spinners like her and Jillian Moreno and Beth Smith, and there's lots and lots of other ones out there that are getting people having these conversations and talking about this stuff. Because we got home, I grabbed my bulky flyer on my Lendrum, which I used to use all the time for plying, but since I got the Hansen, I don't use it as much. So I pulled it out, got my bobbin, because of course I had misplaced it. And I sat down and I grabbed some old 2-ply, like old 2-ply from my stash. It doesn't have a label. I think it might be Knit Picks palette, I think. I started my wheel going in the S twist direction, which is counterclockwise. I hooked up my core and I made core spun. All of that to say this is what I did. Let's get the glare off of there. And I couldn't be prouder. I am just smitten with this. I love what it looks like. I love the texture. I love the colors, and I'm not really a big sage green fan. The color isn't quite right. It's kind of blowing out a little bit. This is more true to the color back here. If those of you who follow me on Instagram, you will have seen I've hung it on my branch. I don't plan on knitting with this. This is going to be a sample. I'm speaking at the Vancouver Weavers and Spinners Guild in April, and so some of this stuff like this and my BFL alpaca skein, that's why I'm kind of keeping this stuff as samples, is just to have the samples in front of me to talk about. So this was a bat that I actually made with my friend Diana, who blogs over at 100milewear.blogspot.com, and I think I'll link to it in the show notes. And it was my very first foray into trying a drum carder and making a bat. And I used Sari Silk, Firestar, and my own stashed ochre yellow, merino, sage green, dark teal blue, and a robin's egg blue. And so this was that first bat, and I had spun some woolen yarn that's actually downstairs in my samples with it, but I never finished the second bat. And so this is what I did with it, and I'm just so happy with it. I divided it up. I spun it on the biggest flyer ratio that I have, which is 6:1. So it's the really big one on the jumbo flyer. I went super slow, and I spun it in the S direction. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because then I did more. So this is Edgewood Garden Studios. This is one of her art bats, and this was Swampy Waters. It's a little bit thicker because it was really condensed from being in my stash for a long time. And I spun it in the Z direction. So that's the clockwise direction or to the right. So a lot of people spin their singles that way, and then they ply the other way in the S direction. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because in the Craftsy class, JC says you can do it either way, but one way might feel more natural. And so if that's more natural for you, just stick with that direction. Well, when I'm spinning worsted or woolen, spinning in the Z direction is more intuitive for me than plying in the S direction, if that makes sense. So when I'm spinning my yarn and the wheel is going to the right, I feel more natural than when I'm plying. And I've always felt like that from day one. And I love plying, don't get me wrong, but the wheel just feels more natural going this way, so to my right. And when I did this, it was the opposite. This felt more natural going in the S direction than this did going in the Z direction. So really interesting. And I think it's because the hand mechanics are different. You're doing a different motion. I found it harder to keep the wheel going to the right. It kept flipping back on me because I was treadling really slowly. It was just the whole experience. Like, I learned so much. And one of the things that she says at the beginning of the show, or I keep calling it a show, I mean the class. And she says this again in the texture issue, because my issue did come and I've been reading it. She says right in the beginning of one of the articles, like, the thing with textured and art yarn spinning is that even if you don't really want to make art yarn, or even if you don't really want to use it, or even if you're kind of not that interested, which is right here, the reason for pursuing it and for making an effort to learn some of the techniques and to perfect some of those techniques and then to learn more and keep experimenting is because it'll make you a better spinner. Because I was going to say the dexterity, but I mean more like the attention to what you're doing is so much greater, I found, with learning how to do this than it was learning how to do a short forward draw. That I think she's on to something. I think JC's got a point there about like perfecting that when you come back to your regular spinning, I don't mean regular, but like back to woolen or worsted spinning versus textured spinning. I think I agree with her. I think it's going to make me a better spinner. So that has been kind of a big like light bulb. So this was a really good learning experience for me. It's got Firestar in there and soy silk and Corriedale Merino, Finn, Shetland. What else was on the list? silk, banana fiber, or banana, what do they call that stuff? Banana something. What else was in here? I don't remember. It was a huge list. And of course it makes a really fun yarn, because like, how fun is that? And it's totally my colors, like, you know, swampy green and swampy yellow, like, yes please. So really, really, really fun. Every area of this yarn is different. There was something in here that was really short stapled. I don't know what it was, but it was really short stapled, and it made these like fluffy clouds. Some of them fell out when I was making the yarn, and I suspect that those are going to be areas of wear that will over time like come apart. And magically, after I wash this, it's perfectly balanced, like there's no twist in it. So I was actually thinking about throwing it through one more time and adding a wee bit more twist because of areas like this. And this is all learning, like I didn't know any of this. These areas here, like they're just not as tightly wrapped in there along the core. So I thought, well, if I put it through one more time, maybe it'll just tighten up some of those areas, put really high uptake and just throw it through really, really fast. But yeah, and then there's these areas where the Firestar got, it was obviously, I didn't break it up enough, and it's like Firestar galore, which is so fun. So yeah, it's just really an interesting thing to learn some of this other stuff, you know, like, I was really starting to feel like I wanted more from my spinning, and the textured stuff just kind of seemed to come along at the right time. I wasn't really very aware that anybody else was kind of doing it, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to learn how to do coarse spun yarn. And then all of a sudden it was kind of just there in this opportunity, and I kind of just grabbed it. So I'm really, really glad that I did. The other very sort of self kind of fulfilling reason, or self-driven reason, that I really needed to start to do this more out of necessity than anything was, if you're in the Vancouver area, little plug here, as of the beginning of February, I'm actually going to be teaching for Sweet Georgia Yarns at the studio once a week for a 9-week beginning. It's going to be a comprehensive beginning spinning course for 9 weeks. And one of the nights we are going to do textured spinning. We're not going to do coarse spinning that night. We're going to probably do thick and thin, just because there's only one thing going on with your hands. Whereas with this, each hand has a responsibility. And this will be an option to do later in the course later in the 9 weeks. There's an evening that you guys get to decide what you do if you sign up and if you're a part of that class. So coarse spinning might be one of those things. But I really needed to get to the point with my thick and thin that I could actually produce skeins, because you guys have never seen a skein of thick and thin from me. And the reason is because I just it's not my thing. But recently I've seen some beautiful spinners do some skeins of thick and thin and dye them and then knit some beautiful things out of them. And it's really, again, piqued my interest and kind of got me thinking. I really love thick and thin when it's coiled. I just love what that looks like. So I've sort of got some ideas, but I did need to start kind of learning how to do some of this stuff. So it's just really piqued my interest all of a sudden. And I'm really, I feel very invigorated by it. Like I feel like there's sort of this new life that's been bred in. It's not just, my future is not just short forward draw. And there's a place for short forward draw, and we all need to know how to do a really good short forward draw. But now it's like, well, I'm bored of this. I want to pull my Lendrum out and do coarse spinning for a while, and then I'll go back to my short forward draw for socks. Speaking of short forward draw, the reason why I'm saying short forward draw is because that's what I'm working on. So this is what's currently on my wheel. I showed you this skein of, I keep saying skein, this braid of Cheviot that I dyed back in, when did I dye this? November, I guess? It must have been November. It had purples, black, gray, blue, a little bit of pink that was sort of more, had like more of a purple tone to it. This was another part of the braid. I'm keeping it away from the camera because these colors are more accurate back here. I left some parts of it undyed intentionally. So there are some white parts of the braid because I was hoping for sort of a heathering effect. And this was some Cheviot that I got locally from Birkeland Brothers. It was undyed, obviously, and I have half a pound, and there's 4 ounces that I dyed up for the fall into winter spin along, knit along that's going on over in the Stitch Addiction podcast. And that'll be given away at the end of the month. So if you haven't entered your socks for that, it's the socks spin along, knit along. Please do so. You don't have to you don't have to spin for socks for that. It's just that the people that do spin for socks and do submit hand spun socks will get entered to win the Cheviot from me. Everybody else will be entered to win a skein of sock yarn from Sweet Georgia Yarns, and someone else will win a free sock pattern from Sweet Georgia Yarns. So I broke these all out. I broke the braid in half. Again, it's way over there now, but my Smith & U was a 2-ply really high twist. This is going to be a 2-ply really high twist because I didn't dye a full 4 ounces. It was more like 3.5. So I wanted to try, the reason for the Cheviot is that it's a down braid. And what I'm going to do is once this is all spun, I'm going to knit up a swatch with it. I'm also going to start my socks right away because I'm so super stinking excited about the socks. But I'm also going to knit up a swatch, and the plan is actually to throw it in the machine, the washing machine. Because theoretically, down braids don't felt. And on the gentle cycle, in our front loading washing machine, theoretically it should be fine. So I'm hoping that this actually becomes an alternative to superwash socks, to superwash wool and superwash socks just in general, because I get hives on my hands from superwash. There's something on it that's left, and it doesn't happen all the time. It's just sometimes, but I'd really like to find an alternative to still being able to machine wash my socks and having hand spun socks because we have dogs and we have to machine wash our stuff. So this is what I did. I just divided it all up into little nests, or nice and thin. And then I'm just spinning them from one end to the other, just randomly. There's no plan with this. And I'm so loving spinning this. I know I was kind of, joking a minute ago about short forward draw, but I am so enjoying this. And actually, I had to bring my whole Hansen because I wasn't going to take this off. So this is my standard flyer. And this is what it's spinning up like. And I just started it the other day. So I think I've only got 5 or 7 of those little nesty things on there so far. It's very high twist, so you can see in some places I've got little flyaways that have like plied back on themselves because my uptake wasn't high enough. So I'm spinning this at around dinner time. Excuse me. I'm spinning this around dinner time when I am making dinner, waiting for water to boil, doing pasta, rice, that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's actually going faster than I thought it would. I'm really, like I said, I'm really excited to work with the yarn. So I'm kind of making it a priority to do that right now and to work on the Cheviot. And I'm really enjoying how it's spinning. I really enjoy spinning down braids. I really like them. I know Chrissy does as well. Her and I've talked about it a lot. And yeah, it's just kind of a fiber, a wool that I really like. So yeah, so that's what I'm working on. That's what's on my wheel. And the Sweet Georgia Club for January is on my wheel as well. But of course, I'm not going to show that to you just yet. That'll be always next show. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to get a drink of water and I'm going to grab a couple of things to show you. And I'm going to show you some stuff that I actually got over Christmas. And if that doesn't interest you and stash acquisition isn't interesting to you, then I will see you later. I do have some housekeeping stuff and I will share that with you after a quick break. I've got a couple of photos that I want to slot in here, and then I'll be back with the housekeeping and a little bit of stash acquisition. Hi everyone. Okay, so I have some housekeeping. I have a big announcement, two big announcements. I already told you about teaching at Sweet Georgia. So anybody who's local and is a beginning spinner, you can rent a wheel from Sweet Georgia from the studio if you don't have a wheel. Just so that you kind of know, the course is going to cover just getting to know your wheel, trying some different techniques on your wheel, so some different spinning techniques, planning and managing various aspects of spinning, from color management to intentional spinning to textured yarns. We're going to make some bats. We're just going to play. So if you're interested, contact the Sweet Georgia Yarn Studio locally, and I really hope that I see you there. Like I said, there are wheels to rent, so if that's something that you need, there are wheels to rent. The other big announcement that I have for 2016, I'm going to give it a go, and I'm going to have 2 shows a month. So you will notice that this show is labeled episode 13, not 13.1, not 13.2. It is episode 13. And this was something that my husband and I talked about a lot through the fall. We talked about the time commitment, and we talked about the recording schedule and so on and so forth. We are going to give it a go. For 2016, I'm going to have a show probably on the 2nd and 4th Thursday of every month. So it will load in the morning. You will have access to it at around 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is 9 a.m. in Toronto. So that gives you a gauge. The reason for that is I can record it the weekend before, get it edited and uploaded throughout the week, and then it's ready to go for the following weekend. So if there's not enough fodder for me to talk about and there's just not enough content, then I might go back to a monthly recording schedule. But with the Sweet Georgia Club and with this big spin along, knit along that we're doing and all the stuff that we're all learning for that, I feel like there will be enough even if the shows are a bit shorter. So and having shorter shows here and there is really good. You can't always spend an hour with me. I totally get that. I'm way behind on my podcast right now, on my podcast watching and listening, because there's a few audio podcasts I absolutely don't miss, and like the NH Knits podcast and Curious Handmade and Prairie Girls Knit and Spin. Those are just a few that I never miss those ones. And then for video, the ones I never miss is the Snappy Stitches, of course, because it's Chrissy and she's my very, very dear friend. And I don't miss Fiber Trek. And there's a few others that I try not to miss, but right now I'm behind on everything, and I hate that feeling. So I get it that we can't always keep up with everything, and the longer shows are harder for some to watch. So I will try to keep the time in mind. So 2 shows a month. They will be labeled normally from now on. So the next episode will be episode 13 and so on. Show notes will always be at wellfordpearls.com. And if you want to connect with me, Ravelry, Instagram, Twitter, those are all places you can find me. And I'm always Wellford Pearls. I wanted to give, because it's the new year and you guys have been with me for a year, a lot of you, and I just wanted to kind of give you some background. I've thought really seriously about changing the blog's name to Woolen Spinning. And the reason that I haven't, and I've kept it as Wellford Pearls, and I might change this in the future, but I think my usernames on Ravelry and Instagram will always be Wellford Pearls, is because Wellford actually is for the part of England that we're from, and my aunt, who all of this is dedicated to originally, who passed away a few years ago, on the plaque on their little house in England where we used to go to see them, as you walked in the front door, there was a little plaque that said Wellford, and I always associated kind of her and knitting and yarn and embroidery, because she did a lot of embroidery and cross stitch and stuff with her, and that's where Welford came from. So that's why I'm so attached to it. And then pearls, I was going to be Welford Knits or Welford Knitting. And when I was figuring out, this was way back when like Ravelry was getting started and you had to wait for your invitation and blah, blah, blah. I chose pearls because it honors the wrong side of our work. I love the wrong side. I love knitting. I love purling. I'm unusual in that sense that I really like purling. And I really like the wrong side. And I also had always kind of envisioned sort of a teaching and learning kind of environment. And I always thought of Ravelry as that type of a community to learn, because I think Ravelry is so valuable for like chronicling our projects and being able to like create, you know, an online journal. But I think the real gem of Ravelry and the real like meat of Ravelry is in the forums and all the teaching that everybody shares and all the wisdom that people share. And so that was kind of where that came from. And then woolen spinning comes from wool and spinning, and it also comes from woolen spinning. So, you know, last year was sort of the year that I started to explore woolen spinning and woolen, like WOOLEN, woolen spinning. And that sort of opened up this whole world for me. So it became kind of symbolic of that. So that's where the Woolen Spinning podcast name comes from. And that's where World for Pearls comes from. So I know it, I just thought I would share because it's kind of, I like hearing where people come up with their names for stuff. So there's a giveaway going on in the group right now. It is in the 2016 goals and aspirations. Get those in. The giveaway is sponsored by Smith & You, which is Marianne up in Kamloops. Thank you so much to Marianne, and I'll be drawing a name for that next time. There's been some chatter in that thread, which I totally don't mind, but I will sift through that chatter for the actual draw. So if one of those chatter posts comes up, I will redraw for an actual goals and aspirations entry. So thank you to Marianne for that. I showed you a photo of that last time. I'll plug a photo in at the end so you can see what the fiber looks like. The other thing that's going on is in the introductions thread, I haven't responded to a lot of people and said, you know, welcome and thank you for introducing yourself. And the reason for that was because in the back of my mind, I'd always had the idea that I would use that thread for a giveaway. And we have a giveaway. So this is going to run until the end of February. So you have from now until the end of February to get your introduction into the show or into the Ravelry group. The reason why I'm pulling it from the introductions thread is because it's a getting to know you place where it's a place where everybody who is participating in the group, it is sort of an initial kind of introduction of hi, this is who I am. And this giveaway is kind of huge. So when all this stuff happened with my ply texture issue, I was in contact with Jessica quite a number of times to get mailing addresses and just get everything all sorted out. And she figured out in a roundabout way who I was and that I had a spinning podcast and blah, 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 blah. Her and JC have offered the podcast a 1-year subscription to Ply magazine. So if that is something that interests you, get your introduction into the introductions thread and I will draw at the end of February. So thank you so much to Ply magazine for that giveaway. It just really made my heart sing that they would be so generous to our little corner of the world. So thank you again to JC and Jessica for offering that. And that's in the introductions thread, and you guys can just go in there, introduce yourselves. And that's why I've kept the chatter in there to a minimum and not put a lot of like, welcome, 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 because you're all welcome. And thank you so much for taking the time to introduce yourselves. I think that's everything. So the last thing that I want to share with you, and if stash acquisition isn't interesting to you, I know I never do stash acquisition. Like I said, there's usually too much other stuff to talk about, but the reason why I wanted to do it today was because I got some kind of fun stuff. And we were in Toronto over Christmas, and a very, very dear best friend of mine lives in Toronto, and so I took the Via train in to see her one day. It was the only day that worked out for us, was on a Saturday, and I took the Via at like 6 in the morning. I borrowed my mother-in-law's car to get to the Via station so nobody would have to drive me. Took the Via in, took quite a few hours because it wasn't, unfortunately, an express train because of the weekend. And I met up with Sam at Union, and then we hopped on the subway and then a streetcar to get to Romney Wolls, which is on Queen Street. And then after we were done at Romney Wolls, we hopped back on the streetcar and we went all the way back down the other way to the Purple Pearl. And then we walked a little bit, and we went to a bistro that we absolutely love. And if you're in Toronto, and if you are ever on Queen Street in the area where the Purple Pearl is, the Joy Bistro has an amazing, amazing breakfast. The Joy Scramble, it's delicious. We both ate all of it, and we both really enjoyed it. So I've been to all these places many, many times. Our family lives in Toronto, and we spend a lot of time in Toronto. But it was really fun after a couple of years having not been back to go and, be in the shops and see how they've changed and all that stuff. So I did buy a few things, and it was really fun to kind of go in knowing that I was looking for some specific stuff, and I didn't get sidetracked, and that I think I deserve big brownie points for that. So Mike tucked this into my stocking. This it was just one more shacked bobbin for my matchless. I dropped a bobbin on the concrete downstairs before Christmas, and it broke. The inside, something happened inside, it like cracked or something, so now it like wobbles really badly. So I did get a new bobbin. It's the little things. I was really pleased because I felt like he had really heard me when I said that I needed a bobbin. So he actually meant to get me two, but this is part of the spoiler teaser from earlier that I wasn't sorry about sharing, it ended up being really fortuitous because I actually have some more bobbins coming to me. So it actually is perfect that he only got me one in the end, because that gives me 4 wooden bobbins, and then I'll have a few travel bobbins. So the other thing that I got, sorry for the crinkling, I'm going to move it away from the mic because it is quite loud, the paper. This was from the Purple Pearl. They were very, very, they didn't have a lot of spindles like they've had in the past, and they had barely any fiber, but I did get one more Hound Design lace spindle. So I saw this and I kind of jumped at it. It's rosewood. It's 22 grams. He is no longer making spindles, and that's actually why I bought it. It's very lightweight. It's teeny tiny. The guy in the store, he was so funny. He's like, you can just pop it in your pocket. I'm like, I don't ever wear shirts with pockets here, but okay. Sure. It was really cute. I did give it a go in the shop, and it spins like a dream. So Hound Design is no longer making spindles. I think he's retired. I have another Hound Design spindle, and when I saw this, I just kind of fell in love with it. And I thought, I've got 2 spindles now. That's perfect for when we are camping in the summers. That's what I kind of save them for, so that I can do some sampling while we're away. It's not because I usually take a big project. Then the other thing that I got, if you can hear Nora, she's with my husband and she's okay. She's just really fussy. She's had a really tough couple of days with being so sick. So I found this in the basement of Romney. This is Louette North America White Masham, and it's just undyed white masham, and it's really beautiful. And there was a lot of fiber in the basement. There was some BFL, and there was some Corriedale and Merino. It was all undyed, but I wanted to get some stuff that was weird and wonderful, so that when I spin it up, it reminds me of the day that I spent with Sam. So I am going to dye this eventually, and I'm going to spin it into something. I'm not sure what yet. It's really beautifully prepped. I'll do something with it. So that was one thing that I got. It's half a pound, which is kind of a perfect amount to do something with, but not be committed to like more than a pound. More than a pound always makes me think of like, you're starting to get to like sweater quantities of spinning. And then the other thing that I got, and I was really pleased about this, I found this buried, Sam was like, she's so funny. She knows me so well. She's a jeweler, so I think she really gets the whole working from like something raw and unfinished to a finished object. Like that's why she went into jewelry, was because she wanted to go right back to the beginning, and fashion design wasn't giving that to her because the fabric was already made, and she kind of wanted to go back to like making the fabric or making the jewelry or working with something like that. So she really gets the spinning for me, and going back to sort of the really raw material. So she was teasing me and laughing at me because I gave her, we had a basket that we were sharing together, and she was buying some sock yarn and some lace yarn. It was really beautiful stuff. And she had her stuff in her basket, and I had my Masham in the basket. And I started like just pulling stuff off the shelf, and I'm like throwing it in the basket just to like keep it organized because I was going to put it back. But I knew there was stuff in behind what was obvious. And so I was like pulling all these bags of half-pound fiber down. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I think there's some stuff back here that I might be interested in." And she's like, "Okay, sure." So, and there was like, I was pulling out like just plain cream BFL and merino, and there was some Wensleydale that I've already got in my stash. And there's some other stuff. And she's like, "Well, this stuff all looks really amazing." And I said, "Well, it is, but I'm looking for something else. I don't know what, but I'm looking for something else." So she was just like laughing at me. And what I did find, it was worth it. I put it all back. It was totally worth it. I found some light gray Swallowsdale. So this is a black-faced breed, a black-faced mountain breed, I think they call it. It's often sold as light gray because it's not true cream or true white, because it has a heathering because of the, they're not guard hairs, but it's just not perfectly, it's just not perfectly cream or perfectly white. You can see them all up in here, all through, where's my finger? Right here. You can see those back here. So it's never labeled as white or cream. It's usually light gray. And when it spins up, it's light gray. It's part of the black-faced mountain breeds. I'll just grab my source book so I had this, I thought I would remember, but it's been a couple of days since I read up on it, and so I thought I'll look. So Swalldale sheep are part of the black-faced mountain breeds. They have white to grayish strips over their eyes or circles around their eyes, also a white muzzle. They originated in the Yorkshire Dales National Park, and there was something at the beginning. Yeah. The black-faced mountain family are from the hill country in northern England, Scotland, and Wales. So you'll recognize these guys when you see them because they often are used for photos of sheep because they're quite shocking. Let me just make sure you can see that. So those are Swalldale at the end, at the bottom. Those are Swalldale. That is a Scottish blackface, and that is a rough fell. So really cool. So they, the Swalldale are, they're the finest of all of the black-faced mountain breeds. They have the largest proportion of finer fibers, but it's still a rough and tweedy wool. And it often has the dark fibers that show up randomly, and it doesn't take the dye as well. They said some of it can even feel like kemp, which can be quite, it doesn't, here's a piece of kemp. It doesn't, I don't know if you can see that. It doesn't, they're usually quite coarse and quite rough, and they don't have a nice crimp to them or anything. I don't know why my camera doesn't want to. Hello, camera. Anyways, that's what kemp looks like. Unfortunately, it's blurry, but yeah, I don't know why it's not refocusing. I guess it's just not, my hands aren't enough. Anyways, those of you who have worked with kemp and know what kemp feels like, you're like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. But for those of you who don't, it's very coarse, and it's often kind of, it looks like wire kind of. It feels like, it's almost like dental floss that's super, super, super thin and kind of hardened, if that makes sense. It's much thinner, but that's what it kind of feels like. Anyways, this type of fiber tends to be great for outerwear, stuff that's a little bit more harder wearing. It's slightly longer stapled. It can be up to 8 inches in staple, And yeah, it's kind of got this creamy, sort of creamy gray-white coloring to it. This is actually the samples that they spun, Carol and Deborah. And you can see right away why they market it as not cream and not white. You know, it's got that like gray cream to it. It's sort of like an oatmeal color maybe. So anyways, I'm really excited to work with it. When I found it, Sam was like, are you happy? Like, is this a good thing? And I was like, oh yeah, totally. This is great. I probably wouldn't have ordered something like Swallowsdale without actually feeling it in person. And they did have some other black-faced mountain breeds. They had some black-faced, it was a dark fiber too. I can't remember what it was. It was, as soon as I see it, I'll know exactly what it was. It was, well, maybe it was Scottish blackface. Anyways, they had another one there too, but I went with this one just because I can dye this, and because I'm still practicing my dyeing, I wanted to be able to do that. So, yeah, so I was really happy with that. And I had a lot of fun sort of reading up about it when I got home and figuring out if I had made a good choice or a ridiculously bad choice. But I think I'll have a lot of fun working with it. I'm thinking something outerwear, a vest or something. And like I said, I'll dye it and do some sampling and stuff, and then I'll go from there and see what I want to do. So yeah. The last thing that I was going to show you, and it's just because it's a little bit of a teaser and a little bit of a spoiler and it's kind of fun to do, was the Sweet Georgia Club for this month. So if you're not interested, look away. But I was just going to show you really quickly my bobbins thus far. So I divided the fiber up into two, and this is what my bobbin looks like thus far. So this is the first finished bobbin. I spun this on my matchless. I don't know why my camera's just not focusing. It just doesn't want to focus. It's got beautiful colors this month. I'm not going to talk too much about it, although I would like my camera to focus. Come on. There we go. So there's blues and grays and greens, and you'll see this all spun up next time. So that's going really well, and I'm actually hoping to finish it tonight. And then I'll apply it hopefully tomorrow. So that's really fun. That is everything. It's a really long show this month, but I felt like I had a lot to share with you. I feel like it's been a while since I podcasted because December's episode was actually filmed quite early in December, so it's been almost a month since I've podcasted. So I felt a little bit out of practice. So thank you for sticking with me. And I gave you a big teaser about what's possibly to come next show in terms of a big stash acquisition and travel bobbins and so on and so forth. If some of you can guess, you can throw it in the episode thread in Ravelry. There is a reason for it, and I sold my soul to be able to get it. So because I made a deal with my husband. I am not going to buy any fiber in 2016. So we will see how that goes. I bought a little bit of a couple of things from Marianne of Smith & You because I wanted to round out a couple of things that I already had from her. And I bought one more braid of Wismas that was the December club for Sweet Georgia Yarns because I have a plan. And that was bought before I found this. So I feel like it doesn't count. So there will be no more fiber and stash acquisition for 2016. And it's like, what, 2 weeks into the year? So I'm really happy with my decision though. And I feel like it's a great goal and something to really work towards. So for the rest of the year, I'm going to be working from my stash, and I have a very well curated stash. I have some stuff I really want to work with, and I'm actually kind of excited to see if I can do it. So that's my big thing for 2016 is I won't be buying anything more. So we'll see how that goes. I might be whining at you by June going, I want to buy something, but hopefully not. So until next time, you guys can guess in the episode thread what I'm talking about, but I'll have something to show you next episode. And until then, happy spinning. And if you have any questions about the spinner's control cards or sampling your fiber or getting ready for the big spin along, knit along that's going on this year, just throw it in the episode thread and I'll be happy to chat with you and answer any questions. So until next time, happy spinning. I will see you at the end of the month. Bye, everyone.